Church, can I invite you to be seated? If you have your Bibles and you're going to want to follow along, we're not going to read all 36 verses, but we're going to be in Genesis chapter 37. But being Father's Day and all, before I get into the meat of my message, I thought I would start with a sports trivia quiz. So, here's the quiz. It's not a tough one, but being dads and all, that's a lot of what we're known for, right? This is Who Am I? I was an NCAA finalist basketball game in my senior year. I was a John Wooden Award winner as the college basketball player of the year. I was then NBA Rookie of the Year and three-time MVP. I was twice the NBA Finals Most Valuable Player, played 3 times on a league championship team, voted one of the top 50 NBA players of all time, was NBA Coach of the Year and NBA Executive of the Year. Anybody identify who I am? Larry Bird. Now, what I want you to know is there are some things about Larry Bird that you may not know. Larry Bird's dad committed suicide when Larry was young, and his immediate family didn't grow up together in the same household. They were split up among many homes. Larry Bird, who accomplished all of this, which I just read, rose above the circumstances of his imperfect family to become this greatly accomplished individual. Trusting God in a dysfunctional family is not always easy. Father's Day is often difficult. And we're going to have something here. I have a triangle up on the board here that I want you to look at. This relates sort of to the message, but more even to the theme of the message. Patrick Lencioni wrote a great book titled The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. Now, these 5 dysfunctions here are part of any structural organization, any institution of which the family is even one. And if the family exhibits these 5 traits, you can be assured that they're dysfunctional. So what I want you to see is that in homes that have an absence of trust, can you all read that, or is it too small? Okay, so I'll just show you. The first one here is an absence of trust. So in a home, if there's an absence of trust, you're well on your way to being dysfunctional in your home. Because an absence of trust breeds a fear of conflict. If I don't trust you and I don't know that you have my best interest at heart, I'm going to avoid telling you the truth because you might lash out at me, and you may never tell me the truth, for you don't know what I'm going to do with that. So we just avoid conflict. We just put it all under the rug, we pretend that it's not there, and we keep up appearances that it looks really good. There's also a lack of commitment that happens after that. You ever hear of the families that the children can't wait to get out of the home, or even husbands or wives also, looking to get out of that relationship? They're not committed to the relationship. They might even stay in the home, but have all kinds of extracurricular activity going on. Because there's an avoidance of accountability that comes in there. You can't tell me what to do. So a child might say to a parent, or a husband to a wife, or something along those lines. Even in a family, there's an avoidance of accountability, which ultimately lends itself to the last one, which is an inattention to results. Families don't even think long term. They're not concerned about where they're going. They're only concerned about their immediate selves in the moment. So they're not concerned about how their actions and decisions and words affect the long-term health of their family structure. If you're exhibiting these types of things in your home, you can be sure that it's a dysfunctional family. And unfortunately, because of the role of many fathers today, this is where we're at. We're going to look in the scripture at one such family that we often think of in a kind of a saintly way. But there are some of these dysfunctions going on. But before we look specifically at the family, I want to tell you of some of these things that I've seen firsthand. Listen to these things that I've heard. A father who brings his new girlfriend to the house at night in a car and sneaks the children out in the cover of darkness in order to introduce them to her while he's still married to the children's mother. This same father marries a woman in Virginia while also still married to his wife. A dad who sells half his business for $500 just so he could get away from his obligations at work and to his family. He founded the business. A mom who did not have custody of her firstborn son at a time when mothers always won custody, and her next 3 children didn't even know that she had a firstborn son for the first 12 to 14 years of their life. A father who kept his first wife around with their child while he was married to this current family, and it caused a great sense of, antagonism, consternation, and a whole bunch of other things. A sexually abused child that no one knew had suffered sexual abuse until his life started to unravel some 30 years later. A mom who didn't know how to talk to her son, so she set an appointment with a pastor without informing him, and then was surprised that things didn't change. A child who was formerly an academic and artistic award winner falling between the cracks for 6 years of school, and no one did a thing about it. A divorced mom and dad who arranged to have their oldest son shipped out to live with him without his knowledge. All of this from one life. A solitary life. The classic alcoholic family case study, if you will, but without the bother. Dysfunctional. But I have good news for you. This life is now filled with the presence, the grace, the mercy, and the abundance of God's love, and He stands before you today. God can overcome our most broken beginnings and do great things. It's tough to trust God when your family life is far from ideal. People have told me over and over and over again, Pastor, you don't know what I went through. And I go, you have no idea. I understand how difficult it is. People want to know, why doesn't God answer our prayers for our children, for our health, for harmony, and for contentment in the home? Sometimes even really good people have really bad things going on in their home that make it really tough on the home. And it's not even easy to explain why. That's why we're going to look at the life of Joseph as it was found in Genesis chapter 37. Genesis has 15 chapters devoted to this one life. There is no flagrant, if you will, flaw recorded against Joseph. No flagrant flaw. We see that he's not perfect, we know that. But he's a man who has an impressive example of what it means to be faithful to God in spite of his continual hardships. Some of our other Bible heroes aren't so faithful, are they? Noah got drunk. Abraham lied. Jacob, Joseph's own dad, was deceptive. Moses killed a man. David committed adultery, and on the list goes. But we find no such recording in the life of Joseph. No matter how much tragedy Joseph experienced, he kept trusting God's hand on him and that God would deliver him. And we're going to see some of the things that happened in his life just today in his family of origin. He was here in chapter 37, 17 years old. Counselors have defined a dysfunctional family as one where, quote, a lot of hurt is going on that produces a lack of respect and a sense of disintegration. Scripturally, it might be able to be defined simpler than that. A dysfunctional home is one where the family isn't functioning as God intended. God designed the family. Remember, the family was His intention. He designed the home, the family, if you will, to be a place of security, of love, and of harmony. A place where people could grow in a healthy environment and come to the knowledge of who God was And instead, what we find are many homes that are a wasteland of insecurity, of loneliness, and of disunity. The first number of verses here in chapter 37 would cause counselors, if you will, several red flags, several danger signs as means of tension in the home. Whoops. The tension that we see in Joseph's family is that he's 17 years old, and it says here that as a 17-year-old young man, he's got some issues that are going to be prevalent, if you will, in his own family. And we're going to look at them a little at a time. I don't know about you, Deb has this expression that she likes to use about teenagers. She says that just at the time that they're supposed to be getting out of the house is when God makes them the most miserable, so that we're ready to let them go. So what we're about to see in this family is a 17-year-old boy who causes some tension in his own home with his, I don't know, what word did we use downstairs, Paul? Egotism. With some of that, right? He's 17, and each 17-year-old child, if you've raised children, or if you remember being 17, is trying to exert their what? Their independence, right? Their own view of the world upon everybody around them. We all know the old expression, while you have all the answers, why don't you move out, and solve the problems? Which they never do, by the way, at 15 and 16 and 17 years old. Even compliant children, my son was one of them. Jason, for the first 15 or 16 years of his life, was the most compliant child I've ever seen. He hit this age, and the pushback was just really strong. It's just a natural developmental thing. And so then you combine that with what? Raging hormones that start to burst on the scene, the discovery of girls and all of that, right? So you start to give your parents grief, you get moody and all of that fun stuff. Well, we know that it starts a little bit before 17 years old. How old was Jesus when he was not with his parents? 12, right? 12 years old, that preteen time. Mom and Dad are returning, from whence they came. And back in that day, family units traveled in caravans, not like ours where we loaded them up in the minivan like we saw in the video, but just everyone kind of hopped on the camels and packed up their belongings, and en masse, they just rode off. So I don't know how long it was that they were down the road, but they were down the road a piece. And somewhere along the line, I don't know, did Mary say to Joseph, or did Joseph say to Mary, "Hey, have you seen Jesus?" Well, come to think of it, no. Have you? Well, not for a while. And so then they start a search for him, right? And where do they find him? In the temple. But what does Jesus say? Didn't you know that I'd be in my Father's house? Well, I'm going to ask you a question. If you had a 12-year-old who wasn't with the family while the family was traveling and they didn't tell you where they were, even if you found them at church, would you be satisfied with them saying, "Didn't you know I'd be in my Father's house"? I mean, that's just, something's going on there that isn't fully satisfactory, is it? And we don't understand all of that was because Jesus knew who he was, but we know that some of that just comes with age, with the exertion of the pushback and trying to find one's own way. If you've had teenagers, or if you can remember your own, and I'll just tell you this in my own life. My mom's description, I don't know if I've shared this here at church or not, my mom's own description of me from the ages of 14 to 18 was that I was an angry, hateful, hurtful young man. That was my mom's own description of me. I'm not proud of that. I don't love that title, but that's where I was at, and that's how I interacted in my home. Primarily because of some of the lists that I read to you. but still not okay, is it? To have anger and hate and hurt be the preeminent thing that my mom experienced. But that happens sometime in the teenage years. The second red flag that comes up after the young man is he's in his father's house and his father's wives. One's enough. I'm just going to say one's enough. It's how God intended it. But imagine what this is doing to all of the children raised in that home. I'm going to tell you this because not only do we see it in Joseph's siblings, this is my family, my father's wives. So my dad was married before he met my mom. I don't know how all of that unfolded and how it came apart. But I have an older half-brother that's only 3 years older than I am. Now, he was back here in Massachusetts. I was born in Indiana. I had a brother that was born in California, and then we were back in Massachusetts by the time I was 4 or 5 years old. When we moved back to Massachusetts, my father, I'm thinking he probably thought to himself, it'd be a good idea to try to be around my son. So what he did was he kept his first wife connected to our family, so many of my growing up years was spent with my older half-brother and his mom, my father's first wife, around holidays and weeknight card playing times and all this. Now, I don't know why my mom chose to accept that, and she's not here to ask now. My mom was a closed book. Unlike me, my mom was really closed. And so I don't have all of the answers. And my dad isn't exactly a reliable source of information either, so I don't know if I'll ever get them. But imagine now my older half-brother, whose father is absent from his home, who's being brought into the home of his father's new family, and it took me years and years and years of my own life to understand this. Why my brother was such a problem for me. Antagonizing and confrontational and argumentative and even, and to a degree, angry and hateful and hurtful. One of my first memories of my older half-brother was this. I'm in second grade, the first year in the city of Worcester, where you can play on the school sports teams. No, third grade, excuse me. Third grade. And my older half-brother's in sixth grade, and he lives in a different part of Worcester, so he's in a different elementary school. So I'm my first year on the team as a third grader, and my older half-brother and his best friend, who at that time in sixth grade already stood like 6 feet tall, are on this other elementary school. I'm getting my first at bat in third grade. Now think about this, you're in third grade. My brother's 6-foot friend is on the mound. That's kind of scary in third grade. And my brother's on first base. And there he is in front of everybody mocking me in public because he wants to see me fail. Antagonism. Because of the father's many wives. Because after the father's many wives, I grew up in that environment. My brother was always around, and we fought cats and dogs all the time. You know, I can tell you story after story after story, and I can just, I'll fast forward it all the way to the age of, I don't know where I was at this point, 15 or 16 years old. Now I'm 6'3". My brother's all of 5'10". He's a scrawny runt. Not that I was a big muscle guy yet, but he was a scrawny runt. So one day, he fights like he usually does physically. We often fought physically. So my mother, in her wisdom, because Neil was at our house, said, if you two are going to go at it, why don't you just really go at it? So I started to. And that freaked my mother out, of course, because I hadn't shown a lot of aggression back towards him physically. I usually took it, and that wasn't necessarily healthy. But you know, because I showed that aggression, my brother backed off. But it was now another thing. That when my father left when I was about 12 for good, he was still legally married to my mom. Somewhere in those next year or two, he really brought his new girlfriend. I can still see the purple Lincoln that he was driving that he drove up to us. Listen, we had 4 houses on the street that I grew up on. It was a dead-end street. 4 houses. He drove up at a time when, I don't know how he knew my mother was gone, whatever. He knew my mother was gone, and he had her sitting in the car, and he brought, I just talked to my brother Keith about this a couple weeks ago, and he doesn't remember this part, but he brought us out to sit in the car with his new girlfriend because he wanted us to like her. Can I tell you that didn't work so good? I've only hated one person in my life, and I've asked for God's forgiveness for that, but it was her. I literally hated this woman, and she was around for 8 or 9 years. My dad lived with this woman. Now I'm out in New York City. I'm not New York City, New York State in Albany, and I'm working for my dad. He finally, after living with her for 8 or 9 years, he finally marries the woman. When I first moved out, when my mom said, you can't live here anymore, go to your father's, I actually had to live in the home with them. I couldn't stand it. My father's many wives. She had children that to me were just obnoxious. Didn't like it. So we're going to see where Joseph's at, right? Because they have different moms. All these boys have different moms. And what it does. So then my father finally marries her, gets a nice home finally. I'm out of the house by this time, but he gets a nice home in a nice section of Albany, and he decides one more time, not to mention the whole Virginia thing that I made mention of, that he married someone illegally down in Virginia while he was still married to my mom. So now he's married to this woman who I don't like, and we've got a business that's thriving in Albany, and we have a receptionist, whatever, a storefront clerk in our upper Central Ave area in Albany, New York. She's 6 months older than I am. While my dad finally married this woman, oh, by the way, did I tell you he got her pregnant in that first year of marriage? So he's finally married to her after 8 or 9 years of living together, and they're expecting a child. A sister that, by the way, I've still never met. We've friended each other now on Facebook, but I've never met her. She's my son's age. She'll be 32. I've never met her. While he's got that going on, he's got this little thing over here with the woman 6 months older than I am. At that time, I'm 21, 22 years old. She's pregnant. My dad disappears from the business, from his home, to spend time with the 21, 22-year-old thing over here. He ends up having 5 children with her. My father's many wives.
Good man.
And many, many children.
I often say this. This is my tongue-in-cheek assessment of my dad. My dad knew one verse of scripture was go forth and multiply, so he did. That's what I say. But listen, let me tell you what. It caused all kinds of conflict between my brothers that share the same mom and dad, 2 of us. Oh, and this is about dads because we're talking about Jacob. But my mom also had a marriage before my dad. She had a son that I made mention of 4 years before I was born, who I didn't know for the first 12 to 14 years of my life. I couldn't remember exactly how old I was, that he even existed, and she didn't have custody of him. And we don't know those details, all of them there, and never will now that my mom's deceased. But the conflict that's going on in the home. Joseph was Jacob's firstborn from Rachel, even though he was his 11th son. If you remember the story of Joseph, Joseph loved Rachel. Jacob loved Rachel. Jacob had 10 children by other wives, but he loved Rachel. So Joseph comes along, and don't you know, Dad picks his favorite. The problems start to stem from that point, don't they? 10 older brothers, who now this new one comes on, and he's not the youngest. There's still Benjamin that comes after, also Rachel's, but Joseph is the favorite because that's the firstborn from the woman that he loves. Don't you know that children can feel that? You know, when mom or dad favor one over another. And don't you know that when that happens, it causes some kind of, I don't know, you can use a number of words, but resentment's the word I use. It certainly causes friction and tension. And it causes all kinds of dysfunctional responses in the midst of these circumstances. This is where Joseph is. The 11th son born to a father, but the first born to his mother. Don't you know that the brothers had some issues, didn't they? He's 17 years old when he has these dreams. I don't know exactly how old he is when his father gives him the coat of many colors, but just imagine the proud peacock strutting around with his coat from Dad, and all the brothers knowing that he's the favorite, right? How do you think they're going to feel? Then Joseph has two dreams, not one, but two, that basically say to his brothers, his older brothers, by the way, and especially in Hebrew culture, where birth order was really important, even though we understand the psychology of it, we don't have the same emphasis of it, but the older brothers are hearing from the youngest, young squirt, you are going to bow down to me. Whew! Talk about some problems in the home. Talk about causing some resentment in the family. So this all is the dynamic of what's going on in Joseph's home. He's having these dreams. He's telling his brothers about him. He's got the coat from his dad. His dad loves him more than the others. It tells us right in the scripture, in the text that we have in chapter 37, the text tells us not just once, but at least twice in chapter 37, they hated Joseph. That's a strong word, isn't it? But that's how it got. They hated Joseph. Can I tell you, that's not a healthy family relationship? I don't know if you know that. I think you do. But that's not healthy, is it? So this family here has some storm brewing, only they don't see it. My mom's definition rather, of me from 14 to 18 years old was that I was angry, hateful, and hurtful, and she didn't know why. Well, it's because of what started to happen to me at the age of 10 when I was sexually abused, and then my father's removal, and then being lost in a school system, literally for 6 years, but especially that first year of transferring from 6th grade to 7th grade that we went into junior high, and being overwhelmed by it all, feeling lost, and being invisible. And I haven't told this, I skipped 30 days of school in a row in 7th grade. I didn't get caught because of my parents, and I didn't get caught because of the school. I got caught because my older half-brother, the one that was around, my father's first wife, one of his former girlfriends had like an appointment that day, downtown Worcester, saw me, called my brother later that day, said, hey, isn't Jeff supposed to be in school? And Neil thought to himself, chance to get him in trouble. So he calls me, not me, he calls my mom. The next day, from what I understand the lineage of this, my mom found out that I wasn't in school again, and I don't know where my dad was. I think I remember where. I think he was living in a motel in a neighboring town at this time. My mom found out I wasn't in school, called my dad. My dad came on a search and rescue mission. My dad's idea of a search and rescue mission was to find me, to literally with boot-shod foot, kick my backside a quarter to a half mile up a dirt road. That was his discipline for me. Literally chasing after me, kicking my foot, calling me names and swearing at me and telling me that I shouldn't be skipping school. Except, this is an aside from this part of it, and I'll get right back to it. My dad dropped out 2 weeks before he graduated from high school, so in my mind already, who is he to tell me what to do? Boom. So, he's kicking my backside a quarter to half a mile up the dirt road. I was so impressed. What do you think I did the next day? Skip school. For 6 years, 40 to 60 days a year minimum, every year I skipped school. Plenty of classes besides, but I didn't like the teacher. Do you know that I only had one teacher, not even one grade, one teacher in all of those years who failed me for the absences from school? I fell between every crack. I never stayed back. I never got in trouble with detentions and demerits and all of that kind of stuff. I just fell between every crack. But there was, to imagine, dysfunctional in every way you can imagine. God has a plan for our life. Children can be affected by our brokenness. It can affect their lives. And our brokenness visited upon the children can then cause brokenness even in the children. one of my brothers and I weren't as close for a number of years because of the brokenness. So I went from that award-winning artistic and academic student to someone who fell between every crack with no accountability and no one knew why. Until 30 years later, when my life came unglued, and I told my mom, this is what I said to my mom. I sat down when I became committed to being a true teller and being transparent about everything, which is why I can tell you this without any feelings about this now, because I've done it for years now. I went to my mom with a lot more emotion than I'm feeling now, and I told my mom. Since starting at the age of 10, I was sexually abused, and that started a whole cycle. My mom, without thinking about it, said that explains a lot. That explains a lot. Our brokenness can change the character even of our children, okay, and our siblings. And what I want to say to you is that God is greater than our brokenness. God is greater than our brokenness. So as we prayed for the dads, when we called them up front, and we prayed, one of the lines that I talked about is about God, thank you for the dads that weren't there for their children always when they were growing up, but who are there as they're grown now, trying to sow back into their life. You know what? Because God can use that. God can use that to restore. God can use that to rebuild. God can use that to repair. So we need to keep encouraging dads to do the right thing and to be the people of God that God's intended. The brothers hated him. Jacob went back and moved into the land that his father was. You know, I know of families because I grew up in the city, and I don't know how it is specifically yet here in Rhode Island, specific to Cumberland, how families do this, but families tend in the city to move a lot. You know, and as a pastor, that's why I get to see a lot. You know, families who are constantly in upheaval. I was over here on, I don't think it was yesterday, I think it was Friday. I checked the answering machine. There were no messages, new ones or anything. I came in this morning, there were 6 messages from yesterday, all from the same person. Because their life is in turmoil and they're being evicted from their apartment and they want our help and all. Did you know that constantly moving can affect your family as well? Constantly, right? And unless you're really nurturing the children, stability is really important for security issues and nurturing and that kind of stuff. And so Joseph, his family continued to move, and his father moved them from where they were back to his father's land. And you know what then happened? These are all signs of instability in the family. Rachel died. Well, who's Rachel but Joseph's mother? So he had a void in his life. Voids tend to be filled by other things that sometimes, if you don't have godly influences, are ungodly, right? So Rachel dies. And this goes on. And so all this stuff is a setup for failure. And Joseph, he's strutting like the peacock. Strutting like the peacock with his coat, with his father's love. And it caused the brothers to just start to really have a hard time with him. And so Dad one day decides to send Joseph out to where his brothers are shepherding in Shechem. Now, I know nobody here that's been a parent has this issue, but I'm just going to tell you something that you should be aware of. Parents have blind spots when it comes to their children. Did you know that? Joseph didn't apparently know his children so well. Jacob didn't know his children so well. He sends his son, who's been strutting like a peacock, who's told about the dreams, so much that his father basically said, shut up, just stop. Right? After the second dream, he said, stop boasting, stop, and your mother and I are going to bow down to you. What do you think this is, right? So, Jacob sends Joseph to kind of check in on his brothers. The brothers who have been having resentment breeding in them, who have gotten sick of their brother strutting around like he's all that in a bag of chips. So, Joseph goes up to meet the brothers. The brothers see him a distance off, and what do they say? Ah, the dreamer. The dreamer. Unlike the prodigal, who, when the prodigal saw the son coming, the father saw the son coming, he ran off to greet him. The brothers schemed to greet him. And their scheming wasn't the same as the racing of the father. Their scheming was, let's kill him. Anybody here besides me ever get into it with their siblings at all? I mean, really physically go at it and things, right?
was every day.
That was most every day for me. That's why my brothers had an issue for me. I was the intimidating older brother in that nuclear home that I grew up in, even though I had two older brothers. But I have all the typical oldest child characteristics. But the brothers saw him, and they said, let's kill him. Now, I don't know about you, there were days I felt like killing my brothers. I just never did. So they were plotting to do it, and they were serious about it, right? This is all what Joseph's grown up with. So he gets there, the first thing they do is say, let's kill him. Reuben, the oldest son, stands up and goes, well, let's not kill him, let's just kind of throw him in the pit. Now Reuben, it tells us in the text, thought to himself, I'll come back later and get him and rescue him from this peril. So at least he had a little bit of something on the ball. But the oldest brother couldn't stop the other brothers from carrying out this plot to do harm to their younger brother. Somewhere, we don't know where, the text doesn't tell us, Reuben goes off thinking, well, we're just going to throw him in the pit and I'll come back later. The next in line is Judah. And if you don't recognize this, the sons of Jacob are the tribes of Israel. These are our spiritual dads, if you will. All right? This is our heritage. All right? So Reuben goes off. Judah says, if we kill him, the blood guilt will be on our hands. And what profit is there in that? Hey, listen, let's sell him into slavery. That sounds like a great idea. We'll make something out of this. And so the text tells us that they sold him into slavery for 20 shekels of silver. My footnotes tell me that that was apparently the going rate for a slave at those times. They sold him into slavery. How's this sounding as a beginning point for Joseph's life? Is it sounding good yet? You know, all this sibling stuff, the different moms, the being moved around, the brothers who resented him, the plot to kill him, the being sold into slavery. This is his beginning. This is his beginning. This is where he begins his life. Does it sound like this is God's all over that? What an ordained plan that must be. God's favor. Look at that child. You know the old expression, they're born with a silver spoon in their mouth? Joseph's not one of those ones. Every disadvantage is about to hit him that we can think of, all from his nuclear family. Sometimes we don't start off with every advantage, do we? But can I tell you once again, God is greater than our beginning.
Amen.
God is greater than our circumstances. God is greater than the pain that may have been visited upon us. Because what we see in the life of Joseph is a man who God will eventually, but it's too premature to talk about it right now. Where we're at now is they beat him, they put him in a pit, Reuben went off, the brothers took him out of the pit, they sold him into slavery, Reuben comes back, finds him not in the pit, it says he tears his clothes, he's going, oh no, what happened? Right? And then they go back and listen, to just put the final nail in the functionality of this family, the brothers go back home with the robe. You remember the robe, they've covered it in blood, the one the father gave to him. Now, these brothers have resented this robe from the day the father gave it to him. They went, Dad, we're not really sure, but could you maybe check this out? We think it might be Joseph's robe. What do you think? Like they didn't know, we know they knew, but they were acting as if they didn't already have all of that resentment building up in them for all of those years. Joseph looks at the robe, examines the robe, sees the blood on the robe, figures his son Jacob sees that, he examines it and figures his son Joseph is dead. It says he rends his clothes as well. They basically let his father think he was dead. That sounds really extreme to me, doesn't it to you? That brothers could do that? They didn't only do it to Joseph, they did it to their dad. He's their dad as well. They lied, and they lied in just such an unimaginable way to us that you got to think, what family? Listen, this isn't Father Knows Best, I'll tell you that. This isn't Beaver, you know, Wally and the boys, right? This our biblical family. This is the family we hold up as the patriarchs, the fathers of the tribes of Israel. Dysfunction exists in every part of your life. Did you notice that? What I want to say to you is this. God can do greater things than what you yourself can believe. God can do greater things than you yourself can believe. I want to ask you a question and get ready to close. The scripture declares that greater is he who is in me than he who's in the world. Church, do you believe that?
Yeah.
The scriptures declare some things about you. Do you believe them all?
Sometimes.
Do you believe that you are loved with an unfailing love?
Sometimes.
Do you believe that you are the apple of his eye?
Sometimes.
Do you believe that you're a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people chosen by God? Do you believe that? Because you know what happens in life a lot of times? We allow the dictates of man to influence our perception of who we are. We allow parents who tell us you're no good, you'll never amount to anything, that kind of thinking, to influence the way we live our life. And it becomes self-fulfilling, doesn't it? Well, they don't think I'm any good anyway, so I'll just continue to be a nothing. And we take the pronouncements of man and we believe them over the pronouncements of God. God has declared some things about us in his word. We need to allow those declarations to be the things that we hold on to. This is what I marvel at when I think about the life of Joseph and where we're going to go in the next number of weeks. He began at this place where we just looked at a family that just operated in such a bizarre way, right? Joseph remained faithful to his God. I got to tell you the rest of my story for a moment and then I'll close. I wasn't raised in a Christian home. I went to church very, very infrequently with my grandma. She took me to Sunday school every once in a while. I sat in a couple of church services, but probably, I don't know, you know how when you're a kid it seems like a couple of things are magnified and they become good. Probably, I don't know, maybe a half a dozen times realistically. It might have been a little more than that, but I don't want to exaggerate that. But at 6 years old, in my non-Christian home, without a concept of really who God was. Because even though my mom was going to become a nun, we didn't talk about God at home. And even though my dad was raised by his mom, my grandma, in a church setting, we didn't have any God in our home. But at 6 years old, God knowing I was going to go through sexual abuse, the loss of my parents, the rebellion that I went through, all the stuff that I shared with you. 6 years old, God gave me I don't know whether to call it a dream or a vision. But I had this vision that to this day, I'm 52 years old this summer, next month, 46 years ago, that I can still feel the impact of it. Because God was preparing me for the things that he had for me. He took me, I don't know how to describe it, he took me to the heavens. I was outside, if you will, I was in the spirit. That's the way the scripture talks about it. I wasn't in the body, I wasn't in the flesh. He showed me the reality of his heaven. Through all of the things that I went through, never once did I doubt that God was real and that God was there. And even though the living out of my life was tainted by all of the brokenness, because we weren't raised in a Christian home, and even by the time I got to church, we weren't properly discipled, until God's Holy Spirit started to teach me, I held on to the reality of who God was. Church, if you have nothing else to do. Anyone ever see the picture of the cat with one claw, out stuck in the tree branch and it says, hang in there, baby? That's sometimes all we can feel like, isn't it? Just hang in there. Hold on to God. Let God take your hand. It doesn't matter what your beginnings are, it matters how you finish. And Joseph finished well. God has a rebuilding to do as we'll look in his story for the next 5 weeks. But what I want to say to you is, I don't know most of your backgrounds. Some of you I've heard a little bit more from than others, but I want to say this. Don't use that as an excuse to not do the things of God. Joseph did the things of God in spite of all that we looked at. And God overcame his dysfunctional beginning. who you are, where you are, God can overcome all of those things in your life.
Amen.
Greater is he who is in me than he who's in the world. That's a choice you have to choose whether to believe or not. The pronouncements of God are the truly important pronouncements. Don't let man take away what God has already established. Amen?
Amen.
Let me pray with you and then we'll close. Gracious and Heavenly Father, today, this day, we thank you for the things that you have done. Father, I thank you for the life of Joseph, who, though he grew up in this dysfunctional family and all that we look at just in this one simple chapter and the indicators, Father, of the things gone awry in his own life, Father, I ask that, Lord God, you would do in the lives of these here today those things that you did in Joseph's life, who from this point forward, after being sold into slavery, was imprisoned after being falsely accused and Father, forgotten as he sat in jail and all of the things that he went through. Father, when we feel that sense of being forsaken, forgotten, or rejected, or whatever it is that we feel, Father, help us to remember to hold on to you, to be faithful to our God, and to look to you. Let the end of our days be better than the beginning, O God. That we may be able to say that which man has intended for evil, God has used for good, to your glory and for your holy name's sake. We pray it in Jesus' name. Amen.